The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed across the quiet neighborhood street. "Ma'am, turn around. You're under arrest." Evelyn Carter, a 72-year-old grandmother wearing a simple blue cardigan, stood frozen beside her own old silver sedan. Neighbors watched from their windows as a young police officer tightened the cuffs around her wrists. "I don't understand," Evelyn whispered. "This is my car." The officer didn't listen. "Ma'am, the vehicle was reported stolen. You can explain it downtown." But Evelyn wasn't crying because of the handcuffs. She was crying because nobody believed the one thing she had spent her entire life proving. That she was a woman of honesty. Officer Ryan Mitchell looked at the papers in his hand. According to the report, the car belonged to someone else. Someone claimed Evelyn had taken it illegally. "Please call my son," Evelyn said calmly. Ryan paused. "Your son?" "Yes. He'll explain everything." The officer gave a small smile. "Ma'am, everyone says they know someone important." Evelyn looked toward the road. "He's not important because of his job." She lowered her voice. "He's important because of the kind of man he became." The neighbors started whispering. Why was this elderly woman acting so calm? Why did she keep saying her son would come? And why did she look more disappointed than afraid? 10 minutes later, several police cars suddenly turned onto the street. The officer expected backup, but what happened next made everyone silent. A man in a county police chief uniform stepped out of the vehicle. 4-star level command decorations covered his chest. He walked straight past the officers, past the neighbors, past everyone, and stopped directly in front of Evelyn. His expression changed. The powerful police chief who commanded hundreds of officers dropped his serious face and whispered, "Mom, what happened?" The entire street went quiet. Officer Ryan's hands slowly dropped. Because the woman he had just arrested was the mother of the man who signed his department's highest leadership orders. But the biggest surprise wasn't that Evelyn was the police chief's mother. The biggest surprise was why she never told anyone who her son was. Why did she still drive an old car? Why did she still live in the same small neighborhood? And why did the police chief look at the officer who arrested her, then say, "You owe my mother an apology"? Because this wasn't just a story about a mistake. It was about a woman who spent decades teaching her son one lesson. Your title means nothing if you forget how to treat people. The street had never been this quiet. Evelyn Carter stood beside her faded silver sedan, feeling the cold metal of the handcuffs around her wrists. She looked down at them for a moment, not with anger, but with a sadness that was impossible to hide. "Ma'am, please step toward the vehicle," Officer Ryan Mitchell said. Evelyn slowly moved, surrounded by people who had known her for years. The same neighbors who once waved at her every morning now watched from a distance, unsure of what to believe. "Mrs. Carter, I'm just doing my job," Ryan said. Evelyn looked at him calmly. "I know you are, son." That response surprised him. Most people in her position would be shouting. They would be demanding answers. They would be blaming everyone around them. But Evelyn didn't. She simply stood there, carrying the embarrassment quietly. "I've owned that car for 20 years, she said softly. "I bought it when my husband was still alive." Ryan glanced back at the vehicle. The old sedan looked exactly like the kind of car someone would overlook. The paint was faded. The seats were worn. There was nothing about it that suggested importance. And maybe that was the problem. People often decided what something was worth by how it looked. "Ma'am, the report says the vehicle belongs to another person," Ryan replied. Evelyn shook her head. "Then the report is wrong." Ryan sighed. "I hear that a lot." Those words hurt more than the handcuffs. Because Evelyn had spent her entire life being honest. She worked long hours raising her son after losing her husband. She never had expensive things. She never chased attention. She believed a person's name mattered more than anything they owned. A neighbor named Linda slowly walked closer. "Officer, I've known Evelyn for almost 30 years. She wouldn't steal anything." Ryan looked at her. "Ma'am, I understand you know her, but I have to follow the evidence." Evelyn looked toward the small house behind her. Inside that house were decades of memories. Her husband's old photographs, her son's childhood drawings, the little kitchen where she cooked meals before every school day. Everything she built, everything she protected. And now, for the first time in her life, she felt like a stranger in her own neighborhood. Ryan reached for his radio. "Dispatch, transporting the suspect." The word, suspect, made the neighbors uncomfortable. Because nobody saw Evelyn Carter as a suspect. They saw her as the woman who helped children cross the street. The woman who brought food to sick neighbors. The The woman who remembered everyone's birthday. But before Ryan opened the patrol car door, Evelyn quietly said something that made him stop. "My son is going to be very disappointed." Ryan looked back. "Your son?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes." She stared down the road. "Because he taught thousands of officers how important respect is." Ryan almost laughed. Almost. Because he still didn't understand. He had no idea who Evelyn Carter's son really was. And he had no idea that within minutes, the entire situation was about to change. For years, Evelyn Carter had lived a life that most people would never notice. She woke up before sunrise every morning, even after retirement. She still made her own coffee, still watered the flowers outside her small home, and still greeted every neighbor like they were family. Nobody saw her as powerful. Nobody saw her as important. And that was exactly how she wanted it. As the patrol car moved slowly down the street, Evelyn looked out the window at the house she had spent decades building into a home. She wasn't thinking about the embarrassment. She wasn't thinking about the people watching. She was thinking about her son, Marcus, the little boy who used to sit at the kitchen table wearing an oversized school uniform, telling his mother he wanted to help people someday. Back then, Evelyn had no idea where that dream would take him. She remembered the nights when money was tight, the days when she worked extra hours just to make sure Marcus had everything he needed. There were times she skipped meals so he could have a proper dinner. Times she fixed old clothes instead of buying new ones. Times she smiled through exhaustion because she didn't want her son to feel the weight of their struggles. But Evelyn never raised Marcus to chase money or status. She always told him one thing. People will forget your title one day. They will forget your awards. But they will always remember how you made them feel. Those words stayed with him. As Marcus grew older, he became someone people respected. He worked hard, studied harder, and eventually rose through the ranks of law enforcement. But no matter how many badges he earned, no matter how many important meetings he attended, to Evelyn, he was still the little boy who needed help tying his shoes. She never used his position to get special treatment. She never called him when she needed favors. She never told people, "My son is the police chief." Because she didn't want anyone treating her differently. She wanted to be known as Evelyn Carter. Just Evelyn. That was why Officer Ryan had no idea who she was. To him, she was just an elderly woman standing beside an old car. A misunderstanding, a case number, a report, but he didn't know the woman behind the situation. He didn't know the sacrifices she made. He didn't know the values she planted in a young boy who would one day lead an entire police department. And most importantly, he didn't know that the person he had just arrested was the one person in the world who had the power to humble the man in charge of him. Meanwhile, at the county headquarters, Marcus Carter was reviewing reports when his phone suddenly rang. The moment he heard the voice on the other end, his expression changed, because someone had just told him something impossible. "Chief Carter, it's about your mother." Marcus Carter froze for a moment. The noise of the busy office around him seemed to disappear. "What did you say?" he asked quietly. The officer on the phone repeated the information. "Sir, your mother was detained during a vehicle investigation. There seems to be a misunderstanding." Marcus slowly stood from his desk. A misunderstanding. Those words sounded simple, but Marcus knew his mother. Evelyn Carter was the kind of person who would apologize even when someone else stepped on her foot. The idea that she was sitting in a police vehicle with handcuffs around her wrists felt impossible. "What officer handled the situation?" Marcus asked. "Officer Ryan Mitchell, sir." Marcus closed his eyes for a second. He wasn't angry yet, he needed facts. Because that was the first lesson his mother ever taught him. Never judge a person before you know the whole story. He grabbed his coat and walked out of his office. Back on the street, Officer Ryan sat in his patrol car reviewing the report again. Something about the situation bothered him. He couldn't explain why. Usually, people reacted with anger when they were caught. But Evelyn didn't. She didn't insult him. She didn't threaten him. She simply accepted what was happening with a strange level of peace. Ryan looked in the rearview mirror. "Why aren't you upset?" he asked. Evelyn looked at him. "Because being angry won't change the truth." Ryan frowned. "You're saying you're completely innocent." "I'm saying the truth doesn't need shouting." That answer stayed in his mind. Before he could respond, several police vehicles turned onto the street. The neighbors immediately noticed. More officers, more trouble, but then a black SUV stopped near the patrol car. The door opened. A man stepped out wearing a county police chief uniform. The entire atmosphere changed. Officers stood straighter. Neighbors whispered, "That's Chief Carter." Ryan's face changed. The highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county was standing in front of him. But Marcus Carter wasn't looking at Ryan. He was looking at the woman sitting in the back of the police car. His mother. He walked toward her slowly. For a moment, his professional expression disappeared. "Mom." His voice cracked slightly. Evelyn looked up and gave him a small smile. "I'm okay, Marcus." Those two words made the entire street silent. Because nobody expected the police chief to look at the elderly woman like she was the most important person in the world. Marcus opened the door himself. He didn't order another officer. He didn't demand respect. He simply reached for his mother's hand. Then he looked at the handcuffs. And for the first time, Officer Ryan saw something he never expected. The police chief wasn't angry because of his authority. He was hurt because the woman in those handcuffs was the person who taught him what justice really meant. Marcus gently removed the handcuffs from his mother's wrists. The small metal sound echoed through the quiet street. Everyone was watching. The neighbors who had known Evelyn for years. The officers who had arrived with Marcus. And especially Officer Ryan, who suddenly felt the weight of the situation. But Marcus didn't yell. He didn't embarrass anyone. He didn't use his position to make himself feel powerful. Instead, he turned toward his mother. "Are you hurt?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, sweetheart." Marcus looked at the red marks left around her wrists. His expression tightened, not because he wanted revenge. Because he knew his mother had spent her entire life helping people, and now she was standing there feeling like she had done something wrong. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," he said. Evelyn touched his arm. "Marcus, don't be sorry. Just make sure everyone learns from it." That sentence caught everyone's attention. Even now, she wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about the lesson. Marcus turned toward Officer Ryan. The young officer stood straight, nervous and uncertain. "Officer Mitchell," Marcus said calmly. "Yes, Chief. Tell me what happened." Ryan explained everything. He showed the report. He explained the vehicle records. He explained that he believed he was following procedure. Marcus listened carefully without interrupting. When Ryan finished, Marcus looked at the documents. The report wasn't completely wrong, Marcus said. Everyone looked surprised. Ryan looked confused. "What do you mean, sir?" Marcus pointed at the paperwork. There was a mistake in the ownership records. The vehicle information was entered incorrectly after a transfer issue. Ryan slowly realized what happened. He wasn't dealing with a criminal. He was dealing with a system error. A simple mistake, but a mistake that caused a 72-year-old woman to be treated like someone dangerous. "I didn't know," Ryan said quietly. Marcus nodded. "I know." Those two words carried more weight than anger. Because Marcus understood something important. The officer didn't wake up that morning planning to hurt someone. He made a judgment based on incomplete information. And that was exactly why this moment mattered. Marcus looked around at the officers. Everyone here needs to remember something. The street became silent. A badge gives you authority. It does not give you permission to forget someone's humanity. Ryan lowered his eyes. Those words hit him harder than any punishment could. Because he realized the woman he underestimated was not weak. She was strong enough to forgive him before he even apologized. Evelyn looked at her son with pride. She saw the same little boy from years ago. The boy she raised. The boy who learned that real power was not about making people afraid. It was about making people feel respected. But what nobody knew was that the mistake with the car was only the beginning. Because the truth behind that old silver sedan was about to reveal something that would surprise everyone. Officer Ryan looked at the old silver sedan sitting quietly on the side of the road. A few minutes earlier, he had seen it as evidence. A problem, a vehicle connected to a report. Now, he looked at it differently. Because he finally understood something. That car was not just a machine. It was a part of Evelyn Carter's life. Marcus walked closer to the vehicle and placed his hand on the hood. "This car has been with my mother through some of the hardest moments of her life," he said. Ryan listened carefully. Marcus looked at Evelyn. "She bought this car after my father passed away." The neighbors became quiet. Evelyn had rarely talked about those years. After losing her husband, she was left to raise Marcus alone. There were no big savings. No family wealth. No easy path. Just a mother who refused to give up. "She used this car to take me to school," Marcus continued. "She used it to drive to work every morning before sunrise. She used it to deliver meals to elderly neighbors when she barely had enough for herself." Ryan looked at Evelyn with a completely different expression. The woman sitting quietly in front of him wasn't someone who needed a lesson about responsibility. She was someone who had spent her entire life carrying responsibility. Marcus opened the driver's side door. Inside, the car was old but carefully maintained. On the dashboard was a small faded photograph. A young Marcus standing beside his mother. Ryan noticed it. "That's you?" he asked. Marcus smiled slightly. "Yeah." He picked up the photo. "My mother kept this picture here for almost 30 years. Evelyn smiled. "You were so serious back then." Everyone laughed softly. For a moment, the tension disappeared. But Marcus looked back at Ryan. This is what people miss sometimes. He held the photo in his hand. They see an old car and assume it has no value. They see an elderly woman and assume she doesn't understand. They see someone without status and think they are less important. His voice became more serious. But they don't see the story. Ryan looked down. Because he knew. He had looked at Evelyn and only seen what was in front of him. An old woman. An old car. A report. He never looked deeper. Evelyn stepped closer to him. "Officer Mitchell." Ryan looked up. "Yes, ma'am, I know you were trying to do your job." He expected anger. Instead, he heard kindness. "But next time, before you decide who someone is, take a moment to learn their story." Ryan nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." Then Marcus received another message on his phone. His expression changed. Something else had been discovered about the vehicle. Something that explained why the records had become so confusing. And this new information would reveal a hidden chapter of Evelyn Carter's past that even some people close to her didn't know. Marcus stared at the message on his phone for several seconds. The street had finally started to calm down, but the new information brought everyone's attention back. "What is it?" Evelyn asked. Marcus looked at her. "It's about the vehicle records." Officer Ryan stepped closer. "What did they find?" Marcus took a breath. The ownership mistake wasn't random. Everyone became silent. The department had traced the paperwork and discovered that years ago, when the vehicle records were updated, part of the information had been connected to another file. A simple clerical error. But because nobody corrected it, the mistake stayed hidden for years. Ryan looked relieved. "So the system caused this?" Marcus nodded. "Yes. But the system is operated by people. And people have to be careful." Evelyn looked at the car again. For most people, it was just an old sedan. But for her, it carried memories. Marcus knew that better than anyone. He remembered sitting in that passenger seat as a child. He remembered his mother driving him through rainstorms to school. He remembered falling asleep in the backseat after long days when she worked late. That car had carried his childhood. It had carried his mother's sacrifices. But there was another thing about Evelyn that most people didn't know. She had spent years quietly helping others without ever telling anyone. When Marcus became successful, people assumed she lived a comfortable life because of him. But she refused. She stayed in the same neighborhood. She kept the same simple lifestyle. She still cooked her own meals. She still walked to nearby stores. Because Evelyn believed something her husband once told her. "Never let success make you forget where you started." Marcus looked at the officers around him. "My mother could have called me the moment this happened." Ryan looked surprised. "She didn't." Marcus shook his head. "No." Evelyn smiled. "I didn't want special treatment." That sentence shocked Ryan. Most people would have used any connection they had to escape trouble. But Evelyn didn't. She wanted the truth to matter. Not her son's title. Not his uniform. Not his influence. Just the truth. Marcus looked at his mother proudly. "This is who she is." He turned toward Ryan. "She didn't raise me to protect her because I have power. She raised me to protect people who don't." The words stayed with everyone. Ryan realized something important. The person who had the least authority in the situation was actually the person showing the most strength. Then Evelyn quietly said something that surprised everyone. "Marcus, there's something else you should know." Her son looked at her. "What is it?" She glanced at the old car. "I never told you why I kept this vehicle all these years." And for the first time that day, Marcus looked confused. Evelyn slowly ran her hand across the top of the old silver sedan. For a moment, she wasn't standing on a neighborhood street surrounded by police officers. She was somewhere else. Somewhere years ago. "I kept this car because of your father," she said quietly. Marcus looked surprised. He knew the car was old. He knew it had memories. But he never knew there was a deeper reason. "Dad?" Marcus asked. Evelyn nodded. "Before he passed away, this was the last thing we bought together." The street became silent. Even Officer Ryan listened carefully. Evelyn looked at the vehicle with a small smile. We didn't have much money back then. We walked into that dealership just looking. We weren't even planning to buy anything. She laughed softly. Your father kept saying, Evelyn, we are only looking. The neighbors smiled. They could almost imagine it. But somehow, we left with this car. She touched the door handle. He told me one day this car would carry our family through every chapter of life. Marcus lowered his head. He had heard many stories about his father. But never this one. He was right, Evelyn continued. This car took me to work. It took you to school. It carried us through difficult years. Her voice became emotional. And when you became successful, everyone told me to get something new. Marcus smiled. I remember. Evelyn looked at him. But I told them no. Why? Ryan asked before he realized he had spoken. Evelyn looked at him. Because some things are valuable because of what they mean, not because of what they cost. That sentence stayed with Ryan. He looked at the car again. A few hours ago, he saw a worthless old vehicle. Now he saw a lifetime of memories. Marcus walked closer to his mother. Mom, I never knew all of this. Evelyn smiled. There are many things parents keep quiet about. Why? Because we don't want our children to carry our struggles. We want them to carry our love. Marcus looked away for a moment, trying to control his emotions. The same woman who had been treated like a criminal moments earlier was now teaching everyone a lesson. Ryan stepped forward. Mrs. Carter. Evelyn turned. He looked uncomfortable, not because he was afraid of Marcus. Because he finally understood what he had done. I owe you an apology. Evelyn waited. I saw the situation, but I didn't see you. Those words were honest, and for the first time that day, Ryan wasn't speaking as an officer. He was speaking as a person. Evelyn nodded. Thank you for saying that. But Marcus noticed something. Ryan wasn't just embarrassed. He was changed, and that change would become the beginning of something much bigger inside the department. Officer Ryan stood there quietly, looking at Evelyn Carter. For the first time since the situation began, he wasn't thinking about the report, the paperwork, or the mistake. He was thinking about the person. A grandmother, a mother, a woman who had lived an entire lifetime before he ever met her. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, Ryan said again. His voice was different now. The confidence he had earlier was gone. Not because he had lost authority. Because he had gained understanding. Evelyn looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled gently. Apology accepted. Ryan looked surprised. That's it. Evelyn tilted her head. What else should there be? I treated you like you were someone you weren't. Evelyn nodded. Yes, you did. Ryan lowered his eyes. But you also learned something today. He looked back at her. What? That every person you meet is carrying a story you cannot see. Those words hit him harder than any punishment could. Because they were true. Ryan had seen an old woman beside an old car. He never saw the years of sacrifice. He never saw the mother behind the police chief. He never saw the person. Marcus watched the conversation silently. He could have ended Ryan's career. He could have made an example out of him. But he didn't. Because he knew exactly what his mother would want. A lesson, not revenge. Later that evening, Marcus and Evelyn sat together outside her home. The street was peaceful again. No police cars. No neighbors watching. Just a mother and her son. I was worried about you, Marcus admitted. Evelyn smiled. I knew you would come. You always know that. She laughed. Of course. Marcus looked at her. Mom, why didn't you ever tell people who I was? She thought for a moment. Because I wanted them to know me. Not as the chief's mother. Exactly. Marcus smiled. You realize most people would use that connection. I know. Then why didn't you? Evelyn looked at him. Because I spent my whole life teaching you that character matters more than position. Marcus became quiet. He remembered every lesson, every sacrifice, every moment she pushed him forward even when she was struggling herself. The next morning, Ryan arrived at the department earlier than usual. Something about the previous day stayed with him. He looked around at the officers. The same badge, the same uniform, but he felt different, because he finally understood the responsibility behind it. Meanwhile, Marcus called a department meeting. Everyone expected punishment. Everyone expected consequences. But Marcus had something else planned. He wanted to talk about a moment that changed the way everyone saw justice. And the person he wanted to honor was not an officer. It was a woman who had spent her whole life proving that true strength doesn't need a badge. The department meeting room was completely silent. Officers filled the seats, waiting for Chief Marcus Carter to speak. Many expected him to talk about the mistake. They expected a warning. maybe even disciplinary action. After all, one of their officers had handcuffed the chief's own mother. But Marcus walked into the room with a calm expression. He placed a folder on the table. Then he looked around. I want to talk about something bigger than one incident. Everyone listened. Yesterday, a mistake happened. Officer Ryan sat quietly near the back of the room. His eyes stayed on the floor. But the mistake wasn't just about paperwork. Marcus paused. It was about how easily we can forget that every person we meet has a story. The room stayed silent. Marcus continued. We are trained to look for evidence. We are trained to notice danger. We are trained to protect people. He looked at the officers. But we must also be trained to see people. Those words stayed with everyone. Marcus explained what happened with Evelyn. Not to embarrass Ryan, not to attack him, but to teach. He told them about the woman who raised him. The woman who worked long hours. The woman who helped neighbors. The woman who never once used his position for herself. She could have called me immediately, Marcus said. She could have said, my son is the police chief. He shook his head, but she didn't. Several officers looked surprised. Why? Marcus smiled slightly. Because she believed everyone deserves the same respect. The room became thoughtful. Then Marcus turned toward Ryan. Officer Mitchell. Ryan stood. Yes, Chief, I want you to speak. Ryan looked nervous. He walked forward slowly. I made a mistake. Nobody moved. I followed the information I had, but I forgot something important. He looked at his fellow officers. I forgot that the person in front of me wasn't just a situation. His voice became quieter. She was a person. Marcus nodded. That realization is more important than pretending you never make mistakes. From that day forward, something changed inside the department. Officers started taking more time. They asked more questions. They listened more carefully, not because they were afraid of punishment, because they understood the reason behind the change. A few weeks later, Evelyn received an invitation. The police department wanted to honor her. When she arrived, she expected a simple event. But when she walked inside, every officer stood up. Not because she was the chief's mother. Not because of her connection. Because they respected her. Marcus stood beside her and smiled. Mom, they want to thank you. Evelyn looked around. She saw officers who once only saw a badge. Now they saw humanity. And she knew the lesson had reached the people who needed it most. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. Because Marcus had prepared one final message for everyone. A message that would reveal why his mother's story mattered far beyond that small neighborhood. The room became completely quiet as Marcus stepped onto the stage beside his mother. Evelyn looked around, slightly uncomfortable with all the attention. She had never wanted recognition. She never helped people so someone would applaud her. She did it because that was simply who she was. Marcus held a small microphone in his hand. Before we begin, I want everyone to understand something. The officers looked toward him. My mother is not being honored today because she is related to me. He paused. She is being honored because of the kind of person she has always been. Evelyn looked at her son with a proud smile. Marcus continued. Many people believe leadership comes from a position. He looked at the badges around the room. They think it comes from a title, a uniform, or the authority someone has. He shook his head. But my entire life, I learned something different. He looked at Evelyn. Real leadership starts when nobody is watching. The room stayed silent. Marcus shared stories from his childhood. How his mother would stop to help strangers. How she would bring food to families going through difficult times. How she would forgive people who hurt her. She taught me that justice is not only about rules, Marcus said. It is about understanding. Officer Ryan listened carefully. The woman he once saw as a problem had become the person who changed the way he viewed his entire career. When the ceremony ended, Ryan approached Evelyn. He was holding something in his hands. A small framed photo. It was a picture of the old silver sedan. I wanted to give you this, he said. Evelyn smiled. Why? Because I realized something. Ryan looked at the photo. That car was never old. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. It wasn't. No, he smiled. It was carrying a lifetime of memories. Evelyn looked at the picture quietly. For the first time, she saw how much meaning that simple car had. Not because of its value. Because of the love inside it. Months later, the story of Evelyn Carter was still remembered. Not because she was the police chief's mother. Not because a mistake happened. But because one moment showed everyone something powerful. A person's importance is not measured by their appearance. Not by their clothes. Not by what they drive. Not by the position they hold. It is measured by the impact they leave on others. And every time Marcus walked into a police station, every time he made a decision, every time he led his officers, he carried the voice of the woman who raised him. The woman who showed him that power without kindness means nothing. The woman who stood in handcuffs but never lost her dignity. Because sometimes the strongest people are not the ones wearing the uniform. Sometimes they are the ones who taught the people